Hello, my name is Elaine Snarson Leader, and this is a podcast called From Despair to Repentance: Jews, Spirituality, and Restorative Justice. This program is sponsored by the Institute for Jewish Spirituality and Society, where I am a fellow. The mission of IJSS is to advance scholarship, social transformation, bringing Jewish spiritual knowledge to bear on the toughest challenges of contemporary society. We break down barriers between spheres of knowledge and practice, enabling long-term collaboration among scholars, social researchers, and human service practitioners. Please visit us at ijss.org to find out more about what we do. In my capacity as a fellow, I've been speaking around the country about restorative justice using a Jewish spiritual lens. This year, I'm working on podcasts to bring you people who are engaging in work on the ground with real people, but imbuing what they do with a Jewish spiritual practice. To that end, today I am excited to introduce you to my friend and colleague, Rabbi Chaplain Ruven Barkan, who works, he'll tell you where he works, and you can see that we are inside a prison right now communicating with Rabbi Barkan. So, Ruben, would you introduce yourself, say where we are, and give us some background?
Sure. Thank you for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be with you and to do this interview. My name is Rabbi Ruven Barkan. I'm Chaplain Barkan, known inside the prison at the Arizona Department of Corrections of Rehabilitation and Reentry. I've been working in this capacity for about over 5 years now, and I live in Tucson, Arizona.
And don't you have some background as a rabbi and having practiced as a rabbi as well? Besides,
Yes, I was ordained by the Jewish Theological Seminary in 2001 and have had a journey through education, high schools, pulpits, and brings me to here in a serendipitous, unexpected way.
how did you end up in prison, Ruben? That's quite a circuitous route.
Yeah, it's quite a question too. Um, well, I was in my previous position, the institution was downsizing, and I wanted to stay in Tucson. And I had always loved working in interfaith settings throughout my rabbinate. And when I saw this position on Indeed, I said, "Oh, that's interesting." And once I did the interview, I was quite surprised how well the position fit. And I still am surprised by it to this day. It still fits very well.
How did
Um,
it fit you?
uh, I think uh, by my personal background of having had a rocky teenage life and going off the straight and narrow path and trying to find myself, I did that through Judaism and always had a passion, kind of a almost life and death passion, like viewing how Judaism restored my identity and restored me to life in many ways, and have tried to share that throughout my rabbinate, and continue to do that. And being in prison, I realized that that Torah that I have to share is quite normal for the for the those who are incarcerated. They too are wrestling with the life and death issues to restore themselves. And we relate. I say I found my people. I found my people here in prison. I wrote an article on that. Yeah.
I can really relate to it. That's how I feel when I'm in prison as well. So tell me about your client group. What kind of prison are you in, and what do you do there?
Sure. So I am there's an Department of Corrections in the Tucson complex. There are three different levels of security, minimum, medium, and close custody. That's the highest level, 2, 3, and 4. I've worked in all of them. Currently, I'm in the highest level custody as well as a medium custody, so I'm on 2 yards. And the main responsibilities that I have are responding to requests for religious accommodations. So when people need religious items, they write what we call an inmate letter request, and we respond with information to help facilitate the accommodation of their request if we can. As well as kosher meals. Not only Jewish people get kosher meals, anybody with a sincerely held religious belief that where they understand through their sincere religious belief that God or whatever powers are requiring them to eat kosher, that's they are entitled to a kosher meal, as well as marriage requests. So those are the nature of the written requests, as well as signing up for all types of services, from Asatru service, which I learned is like a Germanic neo-pagan. Wiccan is another one in the pagan, to Native American talking circles, to all different types of Christianity, Jehovah Witness. So all different types of religions. We help facilitate and organize those services and sometimes supervise those services, as well as pastoral care. When somebody has a death in their family or somebody is ill at home, we notify them, or we provide a phone call, an emergency phone call for them to their family, or if they're sick, or God forbid, if they pass away, we contact their family. So we do pastoral care on both ends, both to their family and to them. And one other very important piece is being present for the staff, the pastoral care for the staff. It's a very intense position. And I'd say my main job is humanizing, walking and talking the yard. I like when people are incarcerated ask me if I get paid for this. I'm very proud to say I do. The state of Arizona pays me to humanize and to be this person who make sure that religion and spirituality happens within the prison setting. And again, that, like I said, that applies to everybody, to staff included.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say one other piece, which I'm sure we'll talk more about, is teaching classes, which I love. And in that capacity, uh, usually everything I've described so far is for everybody, Jewish, all different faiths, as I mentioned. When I teach a class, that's when we can speak in our particular religious voice as a Jew. There's not that many Jewish people, a handful, a couple here or there, but I teach from my Torah, and teach to anybody can sign up, and have had a lot of interesting experiences teaching classes. Hebrew Bible and Hebrew has been a very popular class, going through the book of Genesis, showing how Hebrew enhances the meaning of the biblical text, and teaching them to read Hebrew independently so they can use that skill themselves. Interfaith dialogue has been another really interesting class that I started with to kind of understand where I fit in as a Jew in this whole thing, but to continue teaching that as I figured in, and have a very intense dialogue with many faiths, very open and honest, as well as restorative justice class that I have developed with you in your capacity mentoring me. So that's what I do here. That's my job.
That's quite a job. I'd like you to elaborate on some of it, the classes or the interactions with other faiths, and, do you wear a yarmulke, and what goes on out there in the yard and then in the classes?
Yes, I do wear a yarmulke. Most recently, I had somebody say, "Oh, why do you wear that? To cover your bald spot?"
Yeah.
So I didn't know how to respond in the moment. When I told my kids about it, they got a big laugh, and I laughed about it with them. Um, let's see. Interactions as a Jew. When I first started, I was really scared. Like, how do I fit into prison as a Jew? There's not that many Jews, and so how do they relate to other prisoners who are Jews? And how does then that apply to me? How will that apply to me? And I remember when I was training and shadowing another chaplain on one of the yards, there was kind of this stereotypical interaction. And one Jewish prisoner saw me and he said, I'm a lawyer and all these problems with the kosher diet. And I was like, oh my, and I felt the whole yard looking at me and us. And I was like, oh, and and then as I was walking out, somebody else from the crowd, I think it was an African American man, yelled out, Shalom. And I was so embarrassed. Like I thought he was making fun of me, this and that. And I came to understand, as I should have in that moment, but I think I was still just very scared that that's a great sign of respect. A lot of people uh, understand Judaism it looms large, even though we're such a minority religion, looms large, and obviously Christianity, Islam, but in the popular religious imagination, and to have somebody who's Jewish in the flesh, if you will, people interact, and somebody addressing shalom is a real term of respect and knowledge, saying, "Hey, I know what this means too," and maybe considering themselves Jewish on their own journey or whatever, or however whatever they consider themselves, Hebrew Israelite, Messianic Jewish, whatever that means. That word is always used with respect, and I'd say that 98% of my interactions with people have been when it comes to religious identity has been completely of respect as a Jew. So yeah.
And now tell me about your classes or some of the details in your experiences. I had the opportunity, the audience should know, to visit you at your prison, one of your prisons. And
That's right.
I was very moved by the experience, the friendships that you had with the guys inside, the respect that you were shown, and also the classes. So tell us about the classes maybe first, and then some of the interactions with Jews and then non-Jews.
Sure. A pleasure. Like I said, the first class that I taught to overcome this fear was interfaith class, and I taught Abraham Joshua Heschel's "No Religion is an Island." It's a great lecture he gave to a group of seminarians at Union Theological Seminary, which was across the street from Jewish Theological Seminary, and where he really lays out his interfaith philosophy and really putting creed and belief to the side and addressing everybody as a human being and what we have in common. And as we're all mysterious, engaging with the mystery of through our religions, and saying that no religion is has a monopoly on truth. That's his big thing, and only God is greater than religion. Those are some of his catchphrases, and that really helped me understanding my role in relationship. I had Muslims in there, Christians, people just exploring. That was 5 years ago, and I taught the class last year, and we actually it was a lot of fun teaching it, and we read the article again, going through the article and just using it as a dialogue, jumping off point for dialogue. And the people who were attracted to the class the second time I taught it were really deep seekers, and I learned so much from them, obviously. But people with, I think this class was unique. People with really pluralistic, open viewpoints, and I felt very akin to them, and felt like a minority on the yard. That's not the mindset of the general mindset. And we ended up writing. We had a conversation of how can we, without converting people in any way, but encourage a greater openness in terms of spirituality and religion to appreciate people's different walks of life. And people do have a respect, even if they disagree. That comes with the nature of being human, and definitely in prison, you have to have a respect for differences. Um, Very important. Um, and we ended up writing a sacred text together called Shadow Wrestlers, and you can find it online. I wrote an article about it in Trua, and it's an amazing religious text about how we wrestle with our own shadows and whatever faith background you're from, and the wrestling, like Jacob's wrestling, is very very important to the religious journey. So the interfaith class, that's a little bit about the interfaith class, which has been very meaningful. Whether people are new to it or veterans to it, has been very meaningful in my own journey. Um, and the other class, like I mentioned, Hebrew Bible and Hebrew, and as well as I often have an ongoing dialogue with the Christian population. They're the main ones who sign up for the Hebrew Bible and Hebrew, just hungry to gain more skills to understand the Bible. And these are, again, it attracts many deep students of the Bible, religious devotees of the Bible, and they appreciate hearing the Jewish perspective. And I appreciate hearing the Christian perspective. And I lay out ground rules saying, I'm not here to convert you. I know I'm teaching from a Jewish perspective. We're going to teach Midrash and Rabbinic, but I invite you to bring in a Christian perspective. And they do. And wherever the Bible is cited in the Christian Bible, and we have fascinating conversations. We've actually spun off a few classes from there, just saying, let's just have a Christian Jewish dialogue, which is separate from the interfaith, where we pick a big topic and all weigh in on it, and then from a Jewish perspective on a topic, and then the class weighs in. And so I've done that a number of times, so that's been wonderful. But also very empowering to teach people from all backgrounds how to read Hebrew. And I was blessed with a wonderful curriculum from the Hebrew school world. I'm blanking on the woman's name who wrote the curriculum. She gave me permission to use it for all inmates free of charge. And it's been a real blessing. I've taught probably 50, 60, maybe up to 100 people how to read Hebrew fluently.
They can
So
do it.
yeah, it's designed for third through fifth graders to teach themselves to read Hebrew. So for adults to have this very easy layout for Hebrew reading, people of all ages. It's been a great class to really empower people with a new skill, and then put that new skill into practice. How is this enhancing the meaning of the Bible? So,
Have
and
you
then,
can I ask a quick question?
sure.
Have you a trope as well?
No, I haven't done a trope class, even though I love Tamei Amikra, the notes of reading Torah. I have at times used that to enhance the meaning, um, but I haven't taught a class on it.
Okay. What about the other classes? You had restorative justice. How did those?
Right. So my restorative justice class, as you helped me design it, and that's been really an amazing class. We're helping people take. Well, first of all, it's a dialogue group. I'd say more than a class, where people are dialoguing based on this book that you gave me, the Little Book of Restorative Justice, which is needs based. And one of the central needs is accountability. So just how am I accountable for what I've done, and but other needs as well, like the need for safety, the need for meaning in life, and we go through looking at the different parties who are affected by the crime, and how do we bring healing, and that's the restoration, and healing to the victim, even if they can't be in touch with the victim. But the class did spin off and inspire one of the participants to have a victim offender dialogue, which you know very well about, and he is now out and paroled, and I think a good member of society. and no small part to that whole process that he went through, as well as just what's my relationship with the community, as another party, and how am I accountable to the community, and how is the community accountable to me? How did the community either help me or hurt me? And and how am I hurting or helping the community? And that's another part as well as family. So and most importantly, I think a self. So we do a whole deep study. That's how the book is designed. And I added a layer of Jewish sources as well as some other religious sources. And that just adds a deeper reflection, I would say, to just even though the restorative justice is deep in of itself, but it gives another voice, and hits on other pieces of identity that is so central to identity and transformation is religion. And we that class has been a very meaningful class. I'd say not just in the framework of the classroom setting, but I started working on that class with you, I think in my second year or so, as I started to feel more comfortable. And it really helped frame what it means to be a chaplain for me, and where I'm not just fulfilling those requests that I mentioned earlier, but those requests are really a means to develop a relationship that can lead to restoration and dialogue and connection relationship. So yeah.
I have so many questions. This is really quite a provocative and deep and fascinating conversation. Um, Clearly, the element of spirituality is present in everything that you do. You have really deep, meaningful experiences with people. Talk about the spiritual components that you go through individually or in the class, or give cases. Then I'm going to want some case examples if you can give a few
Sure.
generic ones. But talk about that.
Sure. I would say first principles, like I'd say the spiritual principles that I'm functioning with, I mentioned them above, is number one, humanizing and treating everybody from my perspective as being B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God, staff and made alike, regardless of the crime. And sometimes that can be challenging when the crime comes to light, but still putting that to the side and nonetheless treating them as being in the image of God. And that is one spiritual principle that informs my day-to-day work. Um, and I'd say the second one is, I'd say maybe not necessarily in the spiritual realm, but as important of a spiritual principle is, as an American, that I'm helping facilitate the right to religion and facilitating other people's spirituality. And that makes me very proud as an American, in my role as chaplain, to be in that role. So that's a second principle. And I'd say the third principle is that, like I mentioned, Abraham Joshua Heschel, that I really believe I'm not doing it out of, everybody should follow their religion, even though my religion's right. I don't believe that my religion is any better than anyone else's. I think we're all on spiritual paths seeking mystery. And this is the way I do it as a Jew. And I'm very curious and open and learn and want to empower people doing it however they're doing it, even if they don't have a said religion or defined spirituality, but just empowering people in the world to make meaning.
Mhm.
So that's a third principle that comes from a deep place of theology, Jewish theology for me.
Good. Could you describe some of the interactions that you've had? I know you've told me about some in the past where, you've been challenged, and so talk about some case examples.
It's hard to, I'd say I would start off addressing why it's hard to. Like I tend to keep what happens in prison. I think a lot of that comes, and I'm not saying that's a functioning principle for me, like, but I think a lot of it comes because people on the outside are not so used to talking about prison, so it's not a regular piece of my discourse with people who are on the outside. And I know you're definitely not on the outside as somebody who's been in prison a lot. So one on one, I feel very comfortable doing that with you. But in a podcast,
That's
I give pause to it, not out of principle, but out of I'm just not. It really requires me to think carefully because I also do want to be very respectful to what life is like in here, and it is by design a world that's separate.
right.
So with that said, as a preface, I think what would be appropriate case study. Um, hmm, I would say that perhaps addressing the issue of that I alluded to earlier, that people understand themselves connected to Judaism in many different ways. Um, like definitely like Christianity, um, Judaism is a big part of their theology that they're reacting to Messianic Jews who consider themselves Jewish, but also believe in Jesus, or Hebrew Israelites who consider themselves as authentic Jews from Africa and from people of color and their own theology. So it's been really, really interesting to engage with people who consider themselves Jewish from all these different backgrounds. Where when I first came in, I'd be like, "Oh, those people are not authentic," and how dare them try to co-opt Judaism. Now I view Judaism definitely. I keep my own Jewish identity as distinct, but I view their paths as something I learn from and fascinates me. So there's one person who was in my Hebrew Bible study group as well as a restorative justice class, and he taught me a beautiful midrash from a Christian perspective that affirms Jesus from the opening lines of Genesis, where he said that in the beginning God created the heavens and the world and the earth, and in Hebrew it's Breshit bara Elohim et Hashemayim. So the word et it has no definition. It just is a signal for a direct object. But it happens to be the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet and this last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. So if you read it like that, the first thing God created is et. Et. The first thing God created is, from a Christian perspective, he quotes the Alpha and the Omega, which is a reference to Jesus, which
Huh?
precedes creation. And I've taught that to Messianic Jews, to Christians, saying, affirming their belief. I think it's so beautiful that he's teaching me this, using this midrashic Hebrew text. And then from that, I took it in a Jewish direction, and said, in the beginning, God created the whole alphabet, which is, there is a midrash on that God created the Torah before creation. And, so God created from Aleph to Tav, and that's how I reclaim, and honor, that Jewish, Messianic Jewish discourse. So that's a interesting interaction. Maybe not what you're
No,
expecting.
but it said how the two of you have interacted and grown and learned from each other and respected each other's
Yeah.
positions.
Yes.
It sounds like you really like the people with whom you work.
Oh yeah. Yeah. There has to be very strong professional boundaries as well. Everything I do is department order driven, which keeps, the personal um, relationships within a context. And that's especially important as a chaplain because there is so much interface. My phone is ringing. I have to pause for a second.
Take a
One
break.
second. Thank you. So that is really important as a chaplain, as I was saying, because there is in our role so much personal interaction that happens through spirituality, through learning, through pastoral care. So making sure to stay within the boundaries of department orders and what we can do, what we can't do, is a guiding principle as well for me. So yeah,
And you've come to respect many of these men, and I know what people think about prisoners on the outside. What do you think about prisoners now that you know them on the inside?
yeah, I just to highlight a lot of the points that I've made earlier. I've learned so much about my own spirituality, from the God wrestling. I view them as my people who are definitely doing that wrestling. I mean, look, there are people, it's a minority who are, going against the general culture to distinguish themselves as, spiritual good people who want to make a contribution. And those people are like spiritual brothers of mine. Um, and I feel I'm doing that. I'm going against the culture as well, trying to do that. And like I said, I found my people among those people who are doing that. Obviously, not all people in prison are doing that, um, and I have to say, the people who are really struggling, with whatever struggles of drug addiction or you know um prison can be a difficult place, and I have a lot of compassion for people, and again, that's my role, that's the department's role of how do we address these needs. The restorative justice pieces is needs based. What is going on? And the department is putting in place a lot of incredible programs for rehabilitation when it comes to especially drug addiction. And I work very closely with psych, with people from the rehabilitation community, and they're doing a lot of groundbreaking work, empowering people within prison with these programs and to get out of prison for reentry. So, so I look at people who are in that place with hope, and I think there's a self-fulfilling role there. Like you have hope, and hey, and just say hello and treat them as a human being, and wherever you are, and have a hand that's extended metaphorically or literally. That goes a long way, and seeing people distinguish and start that process of distinguishing themselves and removing themselves from the negative behaviors. And I did that myself, and so I've been there, when I was a teenager, and yeah, having that hope and being a symbol of hope is, as we call in the rabbinic world, symbolic exemplar, or the clergy world.
Mm.
So I like to that role of compassion is very important. Then there's everybody in between, so from the religious classes and dialogues and conversations. I'd say overall, what I love about prison is that it's a very organic community. It has its rough edges, and at the same time, people, I'd say it's a piece that we're missing in the larger community of how do we live in community with each other with all these facets of our identity. And being somebody where I'm in the center of the community, helping facilitate those kinds of relationships and communal relationships is really a passion of mine. And yeah.
I have to say, this dialogue is fascinating to me because you've gone so incredibly deeply into describing the process, the growth, your own personal growth, but the growth of those around you from a Jewish spiritual lens, but a more humanistic lens as well. So it's really a delightful conversation. Ruben, is there anything that you would like to say that we have not covered that
Um,
you might want to add before we wrap up?
let's see. Um, you know, I think uh, being what it's like to be outside of the Jewish community professionally. Obviously I'm still part of my synagogue, and you know, and especially over the past few years where it's been very difficult as a Jew and somebody who's Zionist connected to Israel. It's been a really hard couple years, and on the one hand, I'm very grateful for not having to carry that burden as a professional Jew. It was hard before October 7th to carry that burden, feeling that the Jewish, how do I keep the Judaism alive and my position alive in a community that's changing radically and shrinking in many ways and change, just transforming. So in some ways, it's a real relief not to carry that and being in prison. Um, but and it's also I feel a lot of honor and admiration for my colleagues who are doing that work within the Jewish community, and it's been an honor to serve as a volunteer and stay engaged as a member of the Jewish community. And it's been really hard as just an individual to be going through that process. And I don't share so much of that. I have had open conversations about war and, I don't hide it, but I don't, so it's definitely a part that everyone feels, but it's much more of a personal journey as a Jew that I've been on that that has been uh, that's been difficult. And I hope to bring my experience in prison to bear more directly on the Jewish community in certain ways. And I've tried to do that uh, through some national initiatives as the through the Rabbinical Assembly that has been exploring how to engage people who are re-entering the Jewish community and how the Jewish community can be more involved in volunteering in prison. And Aleph is an amazing, amazing community through Chabad doing that kind of work. But I feel there's a role for the liberal Jewish community to not just address those who are traditionally Jewish, but there's this whole other group of people who are just exploring Judaism in a lot of different ways. And I've not succeeded yet to engage the Jewish community to come into prison. And there's a great need across across the state of Arizona, at least for Jewish volunteers to get involved. So I would say um, that's another piece. And I'll just add with one more internal piece that, as I said, how I'm perceived as a Jew. I think being in an organic community, I think ironically in prison, I think people peg me more as an individual, knowing who I am in an organic community than often I feel as a Jew on the outside community being pegged without, you know, based on the media and whatever. And so in some ways, ironically, I found prison to be a lot more tolerant in
Uh,
relationship to who I am as a Jew, which is interesting and sad in
yeah,
some ways.
truly. So you're really grappling with all the complexity of being a Jew in contemporary society with Israel and on the larger community, but also within, you're not having the experience of people asking you about Israel and war and
Oh yeah, no, I have had and but they're respectful conversations. It's people who are generally open and not people who are just saying, "Oh, you're this," so dismiss you. Again, that's been maybe 2% more like 0.02% of my experience in prison.
uh,
People who do that. Just that's you don't do that to people in prison. It's you have to lead with respect.
right. Ruben, this has been a fascinating dialogue.
For
I'm
me
just
too. Thank you for the opportunity.
thrilled that we were finally able to do this. Are you open to people reaching you if they ever
Oh,
are interested in your work? How do they find you?
absolutely. You can find me I have a website, rabbibarkan.com. And you could email me through the contact button on through my website. So that
Good.
would probably be the best way.
All right. Well, Rabbi Chaplain Ruben Barkan, otherwise previously known as Russell Barkan, it's just a joy to see you again, and thank you
Too.
for this deep and meaningful conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Leader. Always a pleasure and an honor.
Mutually.